Hello, this is Brenda Green, and I'd like to welcome you to Living in the Go. When I was a little girl, my biggest fear was becoming a bag lady on the streets. I grew up poor and I felt very little security. Well, I live in a city now where there are lots of homeless people and not enough shelters. I received some feedback from one of my viewers recently about a community that she serves and thought, how can I help? How can I get people engaged to help and understand? So I hope you gain some knowledge and hopefully think of ways to help to create change in the communities that you live in. So let's get started. Now, the topic that I want to cover are how we got here, what are the challenges, what can we as a community do today, and how do we continue to have hope when everything seems so hopeless all around us. So you may be wondering, how did we get here? And let me give you a little bit of history, a little context. So in 1996, the welfare system in the U.S. was overhauled, and it was based on a business model that focused on the bottom line and not true individual need. 15% of U.S. citizens live below the poverty line. America is supposed to be the most richest country in the world. So how is this even possible? Well, this happens when certain individuals are not allowed to compete for an equal share of profits or resources. It's really a political issue because most of the budget the U.S. Congress allocates for eliminating poverty goes to administrative cost and program support, but it's not really getting into the hands of the people who actually need it. Poverty rates for women are higher than men, and Black and Latino women's poverty rates are higher than white women's. 13% of elder women are in poverty, where only 6% of elderly men are in poverty. So despite composing nearly half of the workforce, women account for 60% of the nation's lowest paid jobs. The salaries for most of these jobs are in industries such as retail and hospitality, and they are consistently lower than in traditional male career paths, such as maybe engineering or energy. Women also make 79% of a dollar compared to men, yet women hold more part-time jobs than men. Even when women have the same seniority or work experience, they are often paid less than their male colleagues. This inequity exists at all levels of employment. Fair pay legislation certainly would help remedy some of this inequity, but really we need more transparency on the jobs. Women and children account for over 70% of the nation's poor. Unfortunately, the nation's anti-poverty and safety net programs have been repeatedly missing the mark. We need to do better. Until very recently, unemployment insurance in most states was limited to full-time workers. So if you were working part-time and you quit your job or you were fired or terminated or whatever, you couldn't get unemployment. And with no assistance, it just makes it even harder for women to be able to get that balance. Work requirements for women with very young children create even higher hurdles. Right now, there are about 12 million single mothers in America. While women's workforce participation has increased, the supply of affordable childcare has lagged far behind, meaning that many single women, especially moms, cannot afford to work or have to spend a large amount of their meager salary on childcare. Regardless of your marital status, family caretaking usually falls on the woman when there's a child involved, or a relative. Women are more likely to sacrifice work and income to take care of a person. So for the many low-wage workers who lack paid leave, taking a child to the doctor means losing a half day's pay or a full day's wages. And your finances are certainly already stretched to the breaking point. Working women take time off for pregnancy and birth, while women with paid leave may be able to utilize that or offset it, but a lot of times women in low paying jobs must often forfeit income during the course of a pregnancy and immediately afterwards. For women in non-traditional jobs, employers sometimes fail to modify job duties or force them into inappropriate light-duty positions. These types of behaviors may constitute pregnancy discrimination, which is a violation of Title IX. Domestic violence, sexual assault, also has repercussions far outside a woman's home. Victims of violence are forced to leave jobs for safety and take time off work to seek appropriate medical care or legal assistance. Many abusive partners limit their victims' economic freedom, controlling their checking accounts and sometimes taking their paychecks. In addition to physical and emotional injury, sexual and domestic violence leaves victims economically vulnerable. Another thing to consider is that the U.S. has long been thought to be an advanced nation, but their drug and alcohol abuse statistics are rising at a significant level. According to some reports, over 20 million people nationwide suffer from drug and alcohol abuse issues. Even worse, the cost of treatment and incarceration run nearly $700 billion annually for taxpayers. That's a lot of things to consider, and when you add that all up, that certainly helps you get a better picture in terms of how we got in the situation that we're in. And I say us because it's just not women who are in these situations. As a community, as a society, we are all responsible for that. So what are some of the challenges? Some of the major challenges that people in poverty face are, the first, the work rate for women is lower than their male counterparts. I talked about that earlier. Wage rates has a major impact on poverty. If the wages do not improve at the bottom, all single parents with 2 or more children will always be in poverty if earnings are their only income. Now, if you look at the family composition, they did a study back in 2009, and the poverty rate for children in married couple families was 11%. By contrast, the poverty rate for children in female-headed households was 45%. The percentage of American children who live in female-headed families has increased over the last 5 decades. In 1950, 6.3% of families with children were headed by a single mother. By 2010, 24% of families with children had single mother heads. The next thing to consider is education, or the lack of it in some cases. Families headed by adults with more education certainly make more money. The difference in the median family income between families headed by an individual who dropped out of high school and families headed by an individual with a college degree or higher was $68,000. That's quite a significant difference. And if you look at our nation's educational system, you have serious doubts when you compare it to other countries. Right now, in a recent study, believe it or not, the U.S. came in 27th in math. 27th. We came in 17th in science, and we tied some countries for 12th place in reading. The U.S. now seems to be in a situation where the nation's youth are at a level of educational achievement that's inferior to that of young people from other countries. So if you look at that, that's a major factor as well. We're not educating people to be able to rise above their station, to be able to come out of poverty, because at one time, education was certainly the way to do that. Also, the poor are not politically organized. They do not have formal lobbying groups or interest groups attached to their cause. Battered women living in poverty face difficult choices. They either remain in that abusive relationship that may provide some level of financial support or leave and become homeless. Some other challenges that lead to poverty are huge numbers of home foreclosures when we had the major crash back in 2008 to 2010. There's snagged in income, there's a decline in public assistance, a lack of affordable housing, a lack of affordable health care. There's mental illness that people don't address, or sometimes they're too embarrassed to even look into it. Addiction, and I mentioned that earlier. And also, if you look at the incarceration rate, a lot of times when people are released from jail, they have no support system. They don't have anywhere to go. They don't have a home to return to, and oftentimes. And so, again, a major issue. So you're probably wondering, what can we do to help? Well, we can expand women's pathways into non-traditional work, which promises stronger salaries, stable benefits, and really is a pathway from poverty to prosperity. These jobs could be in the trades, such as electricians, plumbers, welders. The average pay for electricians is $24 an hour, so around $50,000 a year. For a welder, it's about $20 an hour, and that's about $40,000 a year. Also paying for child care. If you look at every state receives some funds from the federal government to support child care assistance programs. These programs may go by other names such as vouchers or fee assistance, but you want to use those specific programs to help yourselves. These programs help families who qualify, and they pay for that child care so that women can go to work or go to school to achieve those things to help them move into a different circumstance. Don't let your pride keep you from signing up for a social program. If you don't know about it, then ask questions. Make sure that you get involved and engaged because this will help you and your family. You need to make time for domestic violence victims. And I say you, meaning the community. You may know someone who has a situation, or you may be seeing people every day who are in that situation and they don't tell you. If you decide to reach out to an abuse victim, do it during a time when there's calmness. Getting involved when tempers or flares can put you in danger. You want to make sure that you set aside time, plenty of time, to talk with the person. Start that conversation with them. You can bring up the subject of domestic violence by saying that you have noticed some changes with that person, that you're concerned. Maybe you've seen them wearing clothing to cover up bruises, or notice that the person has suddenly become very quiet or withdrawn. Both can be signs of abuse. Let the person know that you will keep any information that they give you confidential. But don't try to force the person to open up. Let the conversation unfold at a comfortable pace. Take it slow and easy. Just let the person know that you're available and you have an ear and you want to listen, and offer that sympathy for them, that empathy. You want to listen without judgment. If the person decides to talk, listen to their story. Don't judge. Offer advice if they want that. Suggest solutions. If you actively listen, the person will tell you exactly what they need. Just give the person your full, undivided attention. You can ask clarifying questions, but mainly just let the person vent. Let them talk. You may be the first person in which they confided. You also want to believe the victim, because domestic violence is more about control than anger. Often the victim is the only one who sees the dark side of that perpetrator. And we've all known people who have been in abusive relationships, but on the outside, if you look at that couple, you think, oh, what a great couple, or the guy seems wonderful. But in the household, he's a controlling beast. Many times people are shocked to learn that that person has committed violence. Victims often feel like no one will believe them because that person puts on that persona when they leave the house. So believe the victim's story. Offer the victim some assurances. Tell the person, I believe you. This is not your fault and you don't deserve this. You also want to validate their feelings. It's not unusual for victims to express conflicting feelings. They stay with their partners and we often wonder why do they do that. But don't, again, blame them. Their feelings might come from feeling guilty about it, feeling some anger, feeling despair. They may still love the individual. That happens often. So if you want to help, it's important that you validate their feelings and let them know that having conflicting feelings is normal. But it's also important to confirm that violence is not okay. It's not normal, and they shouldn't have to live in fear. Some victims may not realize that their situation is extremely bad because they have not seen it when they were growing up. Maybe they lived in domestic violence. And so they don't know at this point what's normal and what isn't. I remember years ago I was talking with this woman I was working with, and she told me that if a man didn't touch her up from time to time, in other words, if he didn't hit her, it meant that he didn't love her. So she clearly didn't have a model to see that this was not a good thing. So she may have grown up in that type of circumstance. So other specific help that you can give is to find different resources and support that this person may need. Talk to them about coming up with a fund. I call it the Leave the Hell Away Fund. Get a checking account or a savings account that's separate from the household. Stash as much money as you can to create a plan so when you feel like you're ready to go financially, you can do that. Those are specific things that can be helpful. Important thing is to just let her know that you're there for her, that you're available. That safety plan that I mentioned, they may not have ideas on how to do that. Well, come up with some suggestions, create that for them, even make an exercise of coming up with the plan and how it's going to work. Help her visualize how she can step out of that situations. Because victims leave their abusive partners, they're at a 75% greater risk of being killed by the abuser than those who stay. So it's important, extremely important, for the victim to have a good safety plan that they can put into place when a crisis occurs. Now, things that you shouldn't say: there's really no right or wrong way to help a victim, but you need to avoid doing things that will make the situation worse. Don't bash the abuser, focus on the behavior, not the personality. Never blame the victim. That's what the abuser does. Don't underestimate the potential danger for the victim and yourself. And don't promise any help that you can't follow through with. If she's not willing to leave or open up, be patient. She just maybe needs somebody to talk to about it to see that this is a reality that can happen for her. Because it's difficult. If you actually see some violence occurring, call the police. Call 911 right away to get them out of that situation, and especially if they have children. No children should have to be put in that position or see that violence going on. So how do we continue to have hope? There are ways to reduce poverty. Proven programs like high-quality early child care and education could help buffer the effects of poverty. But if we really want to improve life prospects for poor kids, we need to reduce the number of children that are in poverty, which means increasing their families' incomes. There are many ideas for doing just that. While economic growth has disproportionately benefited high-income groups here in the United States, it has left low-income households behind. So here are some proposals that could improve opportunities for many people. First being to increase employment. That's where the government can step in. Investments in vital services such as schools, child care, and elder care programs generate both public benefits and jobs. So do local hiring ordinances for large employers in low-income communities. We also need to build low-cost housing that provides jobs as it increases disposable income for lowering housing costs. Your biggest expense that you have is for your housing. Free community college could train more people, and if you believe anyone willing to work should have a job, then the government can be the employer of last resort. We need to raise America's pay. In 2015, the federal minimum wage was $7.25 an hour. That comes to about $15,000 a year annually. That's no money to live on. The federal poverty threshold for families of 3 is $20,000. So try living on that. If the minimum wage were increased, 20% of America's children would benefit. Cities and some states are taking the lead, raising the minimum wage to a living wage. And many studies suggest that strengthening unions and collective bargaining rights would also bring pressure on wages across the board. We also need to strengthen existing programs like unemployment insurance, food stamps, cash assistance, and the earned income credit, along with new initiatives like child allowances and guaranteed income. It can help raise the household income and protect children. In terms of paid family leave, family leave, sick leave, we need to incorporate that in all of the jobs that people have. Leave could protect parents who have to take off to care for new babies, a sick child, or a family member. Because again, a lot of companies don't give that leave, and so a person takes off out of necessity and they lose a day's pay. And sometimes a day's pay makes all the difference. They can't afford it. We also need to end mass incarceration or incarceration. The U.S. holds almost 1/4 of the world's prisoners. The war on drugs and police targeting of young black and brown people have wreaked havoc on those populations. And so removing fathers from the workforce impacts the family, impacts the children. And also when they get out, many employers refuse to hire people who even have minor criminal records. Many parolees are locked out of credit, housing, and even education because of this. So we need to reinvest in returning people to communities, helping them, giving them the assistance so that they do not go back to jail. We also need to invest in high-quality child care and early education. Many parents spend a significant amount of their income on child care, or they can't work because they can't find quality child care that's affordable. So center-based care now averages more than $10,000 a year. That's huge, that's significant. Many studies suggest that high-quality child care helps low-income children build the foundation for skills that will enable them to have better education and in the future better jobs and better earning. We also need to tackle segregation and concentrated poverty. So structural racism here in the U.S. has placed a greater burden on Black and Latino children, particularly in low-income children. They're isolated, they're resource poor, and they're excluded from a lot of the communities where they could have a better life. Housing vouchers, along with rezoning, enables scattered site low-income housing, and it would reduce segregation and concentrated poverty and give poor kids of color better opportunities. It gives them access to resources and schools and social income that they didn't have before. We also need immigration reform. Undocumented workers face limited employment options and are easily exploited by their employers. Their families are more likely to be poor. Children also live with the ever-present fear and anxiety that their parents may be arrested or deported at any moment. And this does so much trauma to their young psyches. The last thing is that we need to end the poverty tax. People living in low-income neighborhoods pay extra for almost everything, from the food that they eat to the cars that they drive. They're dependent upon these high-interest payday loans because many banks won't serve poor neighborhoods. Nor can poor people afford to save money by purchasing in bulk, because without access to capital, low-income people can't save enough to invest in their education or job training. So this is what I call a poverty tax. So in summary, there are many factors that lead to poverty, and as a community, we can make a difference. We need to understand the root causes of poverty and address them first. Politics should be used to eliminate poverty and not focus on the bottom line. That was a ridiculous philosophy and it needs to be gone. These programs have truly failed. Job programs that offer non-traditional roles could make a difference, and we need to learn more about that and steer people in that direction. We need to find ways to actively help in the community with specific actions that we can take today, whether it be getting information, sharing that with people that you know, volunteering in some of these communities and these services. We need to communicate. We need to stay engaged. We need to be aware of the people around us. Life should not just be about our individual circumstances because we are a part of a community. We need to help when we can. So as always, I have some beliefs. Again, these are my opinions. You can take them, you can leave them, but I want to share them with you. Your circumstances today don't have to be permanent. Your net worth is not who you are. You are not a dollar sign. You are a whole human being with thoughts and feelings and value and worth. You need to make small steps and celebrate each achievement. I call them baby steps, low-hanging fruit, whatever. But when you accomplish a goal, acknowledge it. Pat yourself on the back. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It doesn't always have to be money. You can ask for advice, guidance, ask people to even help you find a job. Tell people about your struggles. It can be mental illness, domestic abuse, drug addiction, whatever. Secrets never help you, and they never stay secret. Make goals and tell people about them. It gives you some accountability and builds your support system. Create a positive mantra for yourself and say it over and over again until you really believe it. It could be, I am stronger today than yesterday, but say those positive affirmations for yourself. And last, never get comfortable with unhappiness. If you're struggling, if things aren't going right, then don't get comfortable with that. Each and every day, find some way to dig yourself out of that hole. Little steps, baby steps. But don't get comfortable. Keep moving forward. That's the mantra. This subject was so important to me. Like I said, one of my viewers reached out, and I hope it gives a little bit of insight into what's going on with people and how you can reach out and help, because we're one big family. When it's all said and done, we may have our differences and beliefs, but we are people connected, and we need to share, enjoy each other, help each other all we can, because at the end of the day, this is all we have. We want to make sure that we do those things to uplift, because when you do something for someone else, you feel better. You feel uplifted. And a lot of times, just hearing other people's stories and struggles, you learn from them as well. So thank you so much for your time and your attention. If you like this presentation, hit the subscribe button and tell people about it, because we're starting a movement. The more knowledge we have, the better it'll be for everyone, because we're all uplifted at the end of the day. Have a great day.